Municipal Airport, Maury Field, or Maury Field at Middleton Airport. So we have duly noticed the public hearing in the Middleton Times-Tribune for the past 3 weeks. Mark Opitz is here with the city planning staff, assistant director of the planning staff, and he'll be taking minutes tonight. I know we have a few people who would like to speak, but before we open it up to the public, I thought it would be good for us to have a presentation, a brief overview of the project from Eric Udelhoffen, who, did I pronounce that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Who is works with One Renewable Energy, and they are working on the development of the solar panel array at the airport, and in conjunction with Madison Gas and Electric, who's represented by 3 gentlemen in the back who are here. Don Peterson, Todd Montevideo, and Dan Bolden. Is that right? Dan Bolden. So they're here to address any questions as well. From a city perspective, we've been very excited about the project because our renewable energy, not only did we have a successful climate referendum a couple of years ago, but we also have established a 100% renewable energy goal by the year 2035, and we'll be able to get to 50% of that goal through this solar project, and so we're very excited about that. So Eric, if you would provide a brief overview, that would be great.
Great, thanks for the intro. So as Mike mentioned, I'm Eric Udelhoffen with One Energy Renewables. And I'll keep this part very brief. We are an independent renewable energy developer with projects across the country. We're a certified B Corp and put a lot of emphasis on environmental performance and accountability and sustainability. I've just got a couple of the customers that we've worked with listed on the slide here, and an example project that we completed this winter for Xcel up in western Wisconsin near Cashton. Just a couple other quick points. We're just putting the finishing touches on a second community solar project for Xcel up in Ashland, Wisconsin, and also just wrapping up construction of 10 projects totaling 33 megawatts for municipal utilities in partnership with the City of Madison, Organic Valley, Dr. Bronner's, and Cliff Bar. So this is a photo of one of those sites near Cashton at the Organic Valley campus. So just a little background on this project. I first presented this concept to the Sustainability Committee and the Airport Commission back in January and February of 2017. So it's been a while in the works. We first signed an option to lease for a portion of the airport property in May of 2017, and then started the FAA concurrent use request and determination of no hazard to airspace study in early 2018. The project has been presented in the City of Middleton public meetings on 15 separate occasions to the Common Council, Sustainability Committee, and the Airport Commission. I've got a few slides that basically follow the format of the environmental assessment. So the first thing that that FAA wants in those environmental assessments, and generally speaking with federal environmental documents, is to identify a purpose and need for the project. So in this case, the purpose and need that we've identified is to approve a use for a roughly 21-acre portion of the airport that is compatible with the aviation needs of the airport and environmental resources within and around the parcel. The project will involve the installation of solar racking, panels, associated electrical equipment, and an access drive that allows the City of Middleton to make substantial progress towards their energy goals, which, as Mike mentioned, were spelled out in a resolution passed in 2018, 2018-32, which calls for 100% renewable energy for city operations by 2040, and then 100% for the broader community by 2050. And I'll come to that point a little bit later about how it helps meet both of those goals. So the proposed action component of the environmental assessment is, as I mentioned, that installation of a 5 megawatt solar project. The panels are basically the identical technology to what you'd see on a rooftop around town. There are a whole host of large projects. If you just navigate around town on Google Maps, you'll see NONS, Laser Express, Quick Trip, the Municipal Operations Center, the police station, all have the same type of crystalline silicon solar photovoltaic panel. They have a glass exterior with an anti-reflective coating. There's an aluminum frame around the perimeter, and then wiring on the backing that connects all the wafers into a circuit. And then on the back, there's a polyvinyl fluoride backing that's really similar to PVC. It's the same type of covering that like car interiors and bus interiors and raincoats might have to basically provide a waterproof backing for the silicon wafers. And the panels do not contain hazardous materials. The next main component is the racking, and the posts that these ground mount solar systems are built on are either I-beams or C-channel type steel posts that are driven into the ground 6 to 8 feet, roughly every 20 feet within the array, and then the racking is built on top of those posts. So the photo on the top right is an example of what that looks like. They're driven into the ground with a pile driver. And this project would use single axis tracking, where the rows run north-south and the panels track the sun from east to west throughout the day. So that first photo that shows the morning, it's at roughly a 45-degree angle to the east. At noon, it's roughly flat, and in the afternoon, it's facing 45 degrees to the west. This increases the output per panel by about 15%, and it allows more production in the early morning and late afternoon. There would also be an access drive used for construction and then operations. An underground electrical wire to connect the solar project to the existing MG&E grid, which is along Airport Road. And then the system, if constructed, would consist of over 16,000 panels and would be among the largest projects in the state. From an environmental standpoint, it's expected to produce over 9 million kilowatt hours per year, which is enough to power about 1,000 average Wisconsin homes, and avoid emissions from 16 million, or avoid the emissions of 16 million pounds of CO2 and over 12,000 pounds of SO2 and 9,000 pounds of NOx annually. So just to give everyone a sense of the location, I apologize if this is quite small to see, but basically the proposed project is to the north of the main runway that runs east-west, and it's located to the north and west of the grass runway that runs north-south. It's hugged up against the kind of north portion of the north boundary of the airport property, and it's kind of a strange shape, but it's all designed to avoid any conflicts with airspace and any of the surfaces that are important for air navigation. This is a little bit of a zoomed in view that shows the current design of the single axis tracking. So you'll see the rows run north to south. It's still within the same perimeter as the last drawing, but the last one was an early stage, which was a fixed tilt. So, and then you can see the access drive comes in basically along the north edge and then comes down. In the middle of the two segments is where the inverters and electrical equipment would be located. And then the underground electrical line I mentioned runs from there at a diagonal to the southeast and then over to Airport Road. To give a sense of timing, if all the approvals are received, the plan is to commence construction in late summer, roughly August, and the construction period is expected to last 4 to 5 months. So that would put substantial completion around Thanksgiving and placed in service by the end of the year. That's a roughly similar time frame to what we've experienced with our other 12 projects in the state. As far as ground cover, I wanted to mention that we are coordinating with U.S. Fish and Wildlife to design a low-growing, deep-rooted prairie mix to plant beneath the panels. And due to the tracking, there's more sunlight that hits all the vegetation beneath the panels than you would see under a fixed tilt array where there's a portion that would always be in the shade. So you can actually get quite a lot of vegetation established beneath the array. And this photo just shows the root systems from native grasses and forbs are quite a bit more extensive and allow for greater infiltration than a turf grass, which is shown on the left. So still working on that exact seed mix, but that is the direction. Another component of the environmental assessment covered noise. So during the construction window there, which I mentioned was about 4 to 5 months, the vast majority of activities are very low impact to neighbors and very quiet. So mounting panels, assembling, racking, wiring panels, they're all, if you were standing at the edge of the site, you would hardly know that there was work going on. The exception to that in terms of a noise deriving from the construction is the pile driving, which is limited in duration for a site like this. The pile driver you bring out to site and use it as much as you can during a limited duration window. For this project, the estimate is that there would be roughly 15 days of pile driving, and it would be limited to daytime working hours subject to the noise ordinance in the city. The noise of those pile drivers attenuates to roughly 60 decibels at 800 feet. The nearest residence is about 1,400 feet from the nearest pile location. So, you will be able to hear it from the nearby residences. It will be quite limited in duration and relatively quiet, limited to daylight hours. Then during operations, the inverters are really the only noise generating element of the project. The tracking motors, if you sit out on site, those are tracking the sun throughout the day. They move imperceptibly, basically. You can tell if you watch them really closely and sit there for half an hour, you can see them move a little bit, but those motors don't create any noise. The inverters, create an electrical noise similar to like a refrigerator inverter, which basically it's only producing noise during the day when it's producing power, but at 100% load when the sun's at max elevation, they produce roughly 66 decibels if you're standing 25 feet away. So that's about the sound that I'm talking without a microphone. It's a normal conversation level. And then that sound is inaudible at 500 feet. So basically at the perimeter of the project, that noise would be inaudible. And then it's only created during the daytime. So as part of the environmental assessment, we evaluated cultural resources, and there are no historic properties in the immediate vicinity, no archaeological records in the immediate vicinity, no known burial sites in the vicinity, and all this was confirmed by the Wisconsin Historical Society. As far as ecological resources, so the current land use on site is the portion that is further to the east is tilled row crop land. The portion further to the west is used for hay. And so the project being installed and then basically left in a low-growing prairie mix should improve relative to that baseline the infiltration of water, the agricultural runoff, and then provide other ecological benefits to pollinators, and birds and other species in the vicinity. The coordination with U.S. Fish and Wildlife will be around ensuring that the seed mix is appropriate, given that the site is adjacent to an airport. Floodplains was another element of the study. So a portion of this site lies within the 1% chance of flood, or the 100-year floodplain. So Chuck Nahn is here. Nahn and Associates carried out a floodplain analysis review showing that the existence of the piles will not impact base flood elevations on adjacent properties. This analysis was submitted to DNR. DNR concurred, and then that basically allows compliance with the Middleton floodplain ordinance. So the last point on that is that all electrical equipment needs to be installed above the base flood elevation for electrical code. So that's another thing to note with the floodplains. And this is a map showing basically the location of the floodplain is in blue relative to the panels and the other electrical. You'll notice that the electrical equipment, the inverters and the transformer at the end of the road are outside of that floodplain. What's that? Oh, sorry, light blue. Yeah. Yeah, dark blue panels, light blue floodplain. Sure. Yeah. Or is that all right?
Yes. Any questions? We would ask you to come up to speak into the microphone. I'll put another microphone up there.
Easier to do it after he finishes, or?
If it would be okay until after he finishes, then okay.
So I just wanted to touch on groundwater as well. There were a few questions that came in on groundwater. So with the installation method of using driven piles, the point is to minimize the disturbance to the existing soil as much as possible. The structural integrity of those piles depends on the soil being very tight to the pile itself. And so there's the installation method itself, and then there are quality control checks after the fact that ensure that the soil is tight against those posts and there are no gaps. This will minimize the ability of any water or runoff, agricultural runoff from adjacent fields that's coming across the site to infiltrate into the groundwater, from those posts. The soils are also, which are Wacusta, silty clay loam, and Granby loamy sand, have relatively low permeability rate and high organic matter in the top horizon. So that basically limits the ability of water from adjacent sites to infiltrate because of those characteristics. The addition of the deep-rooted prairie vegetation will also improve water infiltration and compared with the baseline condition of agricultural use. And building higher organic matter in the soil. As far as light emissions and visual effects, the project will not involve any new lighting. It will only be operational during daylight hours. And we had to conduct pretty extensive glare analyses. So on the glare front, the project is designed to minimize glare to both the airport and adjacent residences. There's an anti-reflective coating on all panels. So I think at many of the airport commission meetings, there was mention of, the many solar arrays that are on rooftops in the vicinity of the airport. But they're designed to absorb, not reflect sunlight. And the single axis tracking further reduces any ability of glare to impact either the runway, the aeronautical uses, or the neighboring residences, because the panels track with the sun, so it's generally reflecting the sunlight back at the sun, as opposed to having a reflection on an adjacent receptor or ground level observer. So we used a tool in order to carry out that glare analysis. FAA has a series of guidelines that you have to follow. And there's a tool called Forge Solar that was created by the Sandia National Lab and is now kind of the gold standard for these glare analyses. But we submitted this analysis to the FAA, and it's hard to read, but basically the result of it is there's no expected glare of any type that would impact either of the grass or the main runway for any minutes of any of the days of the year. So it basically looks at all the days of the year, all the sun angles, all the panel angles, and the locations, and calculates what the glare impact may be to those different, basically the plane that plane that a plane would be coming in to the runway at. We also carried out a similar analysis for adjacent residences or adjacent photo receptors or places that a person might be viewing the site from, and found the same result, that there were, from the 6 locations surrounding the site, which were basically the nearest spot that we thought there would be people throughout the day, there are no minutes of glare throughout the entire year of any type. So I was referring to the benefits and the purpose and need for the project, but the plan with this project is for 10% of the output to go to the city of Middleton to offset the use of all of their meters, or many of their meters. And as Mike said, would get them to 50% renewable. The Middleton Cross Plains School District signed up for 20%, and then the balance is available for MG&E's shared solar program, or would be if it all gets approved. So that would allow progress towards the broader community-wide goal of 100% renewable by 2050. So thanks for listening to all that. Sorry, there was a lot of text and a lot of small graphics, but please, any comments or questions, or the floor is open.
Yes, and if you do, please come up to the microphone to make your comments and state your name and your address, what community you live in, and we'd appreciate that. Who would like to start?
And your affiliation too.
Mark, come on up to the microphone.
Hi, I'm Mark Warschauer. I am a pilot at the airport. I live at 6333 Stonefield Road, and I'm also on the airport master plan committee. So I have several questions. We had a 1,000-year flood last year. How would that solar array survived anything? I don't know. I wasn't out there that week to see if it had flooded that area, but do we know what impact that would have been on that site?
Chuck probably knows more than I do about this question.
Chuck, please come on up and speak into the mic.
The analysis that I conducted was dealing more with a 100-year flow, which is 6.6 inches in 24 hours. And of that, it's really concentrated in that 11th hour is most of the rain. The rainfall that we experienced last August was 15 inches in 24 hours, which was significantly more than the analysis that I conducted. I really don't have a good feel for how wide, it would obviously be much wider floodplain than the 100-year. How wide it would be, I really don't know. But I do know that, and Mike knows this as well, that event was estimated to be anywhere from the 2,000 to 3,000 year event, which means that once every 2,000 or 3,000 years you would expect something of that magnitude. It was the biggest rainfall ever recorded in Wisconsin. Now, with that said, certainly we have been getting more and more rainfall. They actually just updated the 100-year rainfall. Used to be a little bit less. Now they've increased it to 6.6 inches. But boy, a 15-inch rainfall in 24 hours, as we saw, would cause a lot of damage, not just to the airport, but to all parts of Middleton. So.
And Chuck, what we had listed on the presentation was 1%, and that is the chance of a 100-year event. So my understanding is that we're talking about 1/10 of 1% is the level that we saw that I'd heard from Dane County Emergency Management. It was clearly over 1,000-year event, but that there really was no gauge for over 1,000-year and beyond. So I don't know if you could project on that figure that Eric showed, but clearly there'd be some threat to the solar panels if that kind of event happened again, right? To address Mark's question. So there's a bit of risk, and but based on the percentages, the risk is probably, I would guess MG&E is thinking that it's relatively light.
Okay. I have another question. So there's a lot of now electronic equipment, underneath the airport now, and the inverters and things like that. What will the impact be on any of the radio communication equipment that we have on the airplanes as we transmit to and from, in between, into air traffic control?
Yeah, so there are, I think, 15 large international airports in the U.S. that have large solar installations that have been approved, and none of those have ever reported any issues with communications equipment. They've all been monitored quite closely for that very issue. So there's no, as far as I'm aware, there's no evidence of any impact to communications equipment from solar inverters. And there's quite a bit of operating history from a large number of these large-scale ground-mounted systems located on airport properties.
Okay. And a final question, and it'll probably be over. Will any of the road construction, or the service road construction, or any of the things sort of impact any water flows that might occur because of a rain causing additional flooding on one side or the other?
Yeah, so we are, and when I say we, in partnership with MG&E and their construction contractor, working on a road design that is basically at grade. So it would have, because the road and all those elements of the project have to get permits from the DNR. And so impacting any flow and any kind of water impacts on adjacent properties is, you want to avoid that at all costs. So the roads that we've done for our other projects are basically at grade. So they dig down a little bit to get the top, so you're not sinking in, but get the topsoil off and then install riprap and gravel on top. But then it's at the grade that the adjacent land is, or cropland in this case, to the north, in order so that the water would travel across the road in the same way that it currently travels across that same location.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
Shorter. I'm Sherry Gruder with UW-Madison Extension. I run the Energy on Wisconsin program that moves communities toward energy independence. And am very happy to see this project happen. And I'm also a resident of Middleton, and I'm on the list to get solar from this project because it's not available in the condo where I live, given the roof. So it will serve a great purpose that way. And I'm very happy to know that you will be planting prairie plants and pollinator species and good habitat. Typically, that takes a few years to get established, and I was just wondering who's responsible for weeding and actually getting that established, and what are the plans for that? So that's just one of 3 questions.
Okay, great. Yeah, so the Wisconsin DNR has a pretty good guidebook for establishing different types of vegetation on disturbed areas. That's part of the stormwater permitting process. So, for example, with some of our other projects that we're seeding to a similar pollinator-friendly mix, the recommendation from DNR is to put a nurse crop with those of oats or something like a cereal grain that's fast-growing and establishes quickly, stabilizes the soil, and then allows the slower to germinate perennials to come up without a lot of competition from weeds. So that plan has yet to be fully fleshed out, but it depends on the exact timing. But if construction completes like at the end of the summer, and there's not a window to be able to establish that, then it would likely be seeded in the winter,
crops.
like frost seeded in the winter, and then established in the spring. But definitely part of the maintenance plan for all these projects is to have more frequent mowings in the first several years to make sure that the annual weeds don't set seed, and then also to allow light to get to the lower, like the legumes and things that haven't grown as tall at that point. So as far as the responsibility, MG&E will be the project owner, and they will have a contract with someone to maintain the site, and probably, I don't know if it'll be the same firm that will be maintaining the site from an electrical and solar standpoint, but there'll be someone else contracted to manage the vegetation. So yeah, like with all of our other 13 projects, there's a vegetation management contractor that comes in and is responsible for making sure there's a good stand established.
Great. Second question refers to what already was asked, and that's about the 1,000-year flood. 100-year floods do not happen every 100 years. They happen every month practically, sometimes every few weeks. And given that the city, as part of their 100% renewable energy resolution, also has within that says that they're going to do a resilience plan, they're looking at adaptation and obviously planning infrastructure for extreme weather events is really important to do. So we can't just say that, oh, well, that's not going to happen for another 1,000 years. In fact, it will. And so, and we don't know how often, but knowing that, we should be planning for it. So I'm just wondering about not so much the water on the field, but more the level at which you're putting the electrical wires and whatever. Are you planning to get above that level? And what is the thought there? Because we really should be planning for adaptation and planning infrastructure that will address that.
Yeah, I will have to defer on the question of exactly what height the electrical equipment will be. I know at a certain point the water goes over the runway, and so there is kind of a maximum level that it would basically the water that would be in this array is coming from the north, would go through the culverts under the runway and is like a backwater that pushes back to the north into the area of the array. But at a certain point, the water gets so high that it goes over the runway, and that lets out the water that would be pushing back. So there is kind of a maximum level determined by that elevation. The final engineering on exactly the elevations of all the electrical equipment is still subject to MG&E's review and finalization with the construction
And is that
contractor.
something that you're considering taking into account?
Definitely, and you want me to come up, I know.
Thanks, Don.
Yeah, I mean,
What's your name?
my name is Don Peterson from MG&E. So the idea is that the panels are up on racking, which is about 5 feet in the air?
Usually it's about as tall as me, so about 6 feet.
6 feet.
A little taller than 6 feet.
So the wires are on the back of the panels at that 6 feet level, and the string inverters are also mounted on that, in that area, or are they mounted kind of in that elevation or height?
Yeah, they can be mounted as low as 3 feet or as high. I mean, pretty much as high as you want.
Right, and that's something we can take into account. So you'd have to have flood water that's basically above 5 feet to be really flooding anything. So we've also, the transformer and the electrical equipment is located up in the west portion of the site, which is outside of the wetland and the floodplain, I believe.
West portion, you said?
Yeah, if you well.
North central. Yeah.
It's more central, I guess. But if you look at his map, right there, you can see that the electrical equipment is up, kind of out of that area.
So my third question, don't sit down.
Okay.
My third question is also looking into the future and also has to do with adaptation, and that is considering that doing distributed energy generation closer to the source, which is wonderful. It doesn't have to travel far on wires. If the grid goes down, this is an opportunity to actually generate energy locally. And I'm wondering if there are plans or if there was any drawing or land set aside to be able to add storage, so we have solar plus storage at a later time. And if not, if you could consider that, again, looking at adaptation and
Right.
keeping the power on.
Right, and I think with this particular project, we're really hemmed in with the amount of property that we have. We have looked at other projects, kind of similar projects, and there's enough land available that storage could be something that we could add at a later date. With this project, I think we probably have to acquire some additional land, either from an adjacent property owner to be able to accommodate much storage there. I don't know, Eric, if you have an opinion on that.
I guess, yeah, I mean, I have spoken to the neighbors, and it's seems relatively unlikely that would work, but in the near term, but you never know. I mean, storage doesn't necessarily have to be immediately adjacent to the project either, as long as it's in the same
That's true. The
vicinity,
storage could be
so.
located out, on Airport Road or closer to Airport Road where it connects into the grid. That's true, yeah.
Well, it could be a very good opportunity,
Right,
so
right.
just wanted to put it on the
Okay,
docket.
sure.
Thank you, that's
Right.
it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next comment?
Okay, my name is Richard Morey. I am the airport manager at the Middleton Municipal Airport Morey Field. I am also on the Airport Oversight Committee, and I am an asset for the airport, another airport committee, whatever it is. Anyway, I'm asking this question not because I think there is any issue with this, but it has been brought up on the Oversight Committee, a concern that there might be lead leaching from the solar panels, and I just wish to put something on record that addresses that question.
Yeah. So they're. Let's see. I'll go back to this slide. The panels that we're planning to use that are this crystalline silicon wafer type panels do not have lead or hazardous materials.
Good, that's all I needed to
okay.
know.
Yeah.
I just wanted, when this comes up at the next meeting, as it probably will, we want to have something to be able to address
We
it
have it on
directly.
tape now. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, just to talk about our 2,000-year flood, it never reached the point of overtopping the runway. It went about halfway across the northwest portion of the runway and then stopped. And we can get you a pretty good idea of how high it did get, because it did take out part of our weather reporting station, which isn't that far from where you're going to be having your major your inverters. So we can give you a pretty good height as to where it went.
Okay.
Obviously, engineer it to be a little higher than that.
Okay.
And I'd encourage you to do so, because that was a very expensive proposition for the airport, to the tune of about $25,000 to replace that unit, if I remember correctly.
How high is that off the ground, do you know roughly?
I don't
5
know. Certainly, it is not 5 feet. I'm sure it's closer to about 2 to 3 feet high. So we shouldn't have any real issues out there. There are existing plants. Whatever was on that property prior is growing now and is very, doing actually quite well. Are you planning on, with doing the pile driving, you're not really going to disrupt that. You're not going to tear it up. So were you planning on hitting it with Roundup and then replanting, or simply planting over what is existing?
So the final plans haven't been filed with DNR as far as what exactly would occur. Based on our experience with other projects, it is, if there is existing vegetation, it is absolutely best for everyone to leave that in place throughout the entire construction process, so that, because then you don't have, as you're moving a pile driver through, you disturb less soil, and it's just best for everyone to leave that in place. Then once the project's in the next growing season, then you either have the option of like a close mow and then interseeding, or using herbicide and then establishing something into that.
Okay.
But yeah, I guess definitely would plan on keeping the vegetation that's there in place throughout construction.
Yeah, I'd be in favor of the close mow and interseeding. I also would recommend our current farmer who's handling the mowing might be in a good position to help you out, Larry Wagner. He's done well for the airport over the years, and he knows the property. Then the last question I have is, you're talking about the electrical cabling, and I know it's been explained to me before why it can't go the more direct route that would have less impact on the airport, as in straight north to Schneider. Could you explain why that isn't a viable option?
From my understanding, the line on Schneider Road is heavily loaded as it is with the biodigester further to the west. Mm-hmm. And from an electrical engineering standpoint, it doesn't have adequate capacity to handle this size of generator. Whereas the line along Airport Road does, and it would enable the interconnection of the project with relatively minor upgrades. We've encountered a similar thing elsewhere. If you have to engage in kind of significant upgrades of a specific feeder, it makes a project uneconomical.
Okay, so it's economically, in other words, it's much less expensive to go that route. Okay, that's what I needed to know. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to go next?
Hi, Bartlett Durand, Middleton resident, 2515 Sand Pearl Trail, fairly close to the airport. I work for Sand County Foundation, but I'm here in my personal capacity. Wanted to comment on the prairie you're putting underneath. Thank you for your responsiveness to that, putting that in the plan. I did contact the certified wildlife biologist and state director for wildlife services for USDA animal and plant health inspection services, and he is in full agreement that prairie's a great way to go. We'll have the same or even less wildlife hazard impact on the airport as does the straight grass. And more importantly, I think beyond pollinator and all this happy stuff we all kind of agree with, you have pretty significant water quality improvement by doing prairie strips like this. In fact, with my work with Sand County, putting in prairies is one of the primary things we do to improve water quality and prevent runoff from farm fields. So we're having, how many, was it 23 acres?
Yeah, roughly 21.
21 acres of prairie going in. That is, I don't want to say it's an afterthought, but it's a fantastic addition that we'd be doing backflips over if we were just putting it in the prairie. So not only do you get significant water infiltration, and I mean, it's not flood storage, but it's better infiltration from rainfall. It's going to prevent a significant amount of nutrient coming off those farm fields now. And if you haven't talked to them, I'd suggest you talk to the Yahara Winds project, because you might be able to get credit for this prairie strip with that project for the nutrient reduction you're going to see from that.
Who did you say?
Yahara Winds. It's the
Yahara Winds.
You're part of the.
Our stormwater
It's the storm
adaptation
and
program.
It's the storm and municipal wastewater program where it's the adaptive management thing.
Yeah,
So
adaptive management through Madison Metropolitan Sewerage District.
that's the one. So this is a significant amount of credit for Middleton that we should look into as well. But for MG&E and for Eric, well done with the prairies, and it looks great.
Thank you for that comment. That's really a good suggestion for our adaptive management program. That helps us to limit costs, as Chuck knows, right? Okay.
It's Yahara Winds, W-I-N-S?
Yahara Winds, W-I-N-S.
Okay.
Good evening. My name is Mike Barnett. I'm speaking tonight on in support of this project. I'm a mechanical engineer by training. I work down the street here on Parmenter and Hubbard at HGA, architectural and engineering firm, formerly Sustainable Engineering Group. And we actually have solar panels on our roof, and they provide 100% of the electricity for our office. And it's working great, and we're excited to see more solar in Middleton. I'm actually on the wait list for the shared solar program as well. I'm a resident of Madison and excited to see more opportunities for us to get local, clean, renewable energy. As an engineer, we've been involved in some airports installing solar, most recently with the Appleton Airport. Installed about 500 kW of solar on their roofs and their parking lot, and they haven't experienced any issues related to communications or glare or anything of the sort. So what we're doing here, what MG&E and One Energy is doing is not new, and it's, as Eric mentioned, it's being done around the country, around the world. So I think people could learn from those experiences and take comfort in that. I'm glad to see there's not a lot of people here tonight. This should not be a contentious issue, and excited to hopefully see this project move forward. We got to keep the trees and the forest separate here. Most of our power is coming from coal plants in Portage and south of Milwaukee. And environmental impacts of this project are really minuscule compared to the impacts of the current generation. So I guess with that, I'll just turn it over to you guys. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any further comments from the public? MG&E want to provide any further comment?
I think that Eric said that we were seeking approval of our shared solar rate that we filed with the Public Service Commission. I wanted to mention that the open meeting today at the Public Service Commission, they approved that rate. So the shared solar portion is approved and ready to go. The renewable energy rider, which is the part that the city of Middleton and the school district will be participating in, is commission has written their memo on it. It's out on the commission IRF. I think comments are due by Monday, but it'll be on the commission docket for approval or for consideration, I should say. Hopefully approval, probably later in July. So just want to give you that update.
Thanks, Don. Any further comments? If not, I would like to thank you all for being here as dedicated residents and with your interest in the project. I personally feel that this is a fantastic project, and I hope we can move it forward. And thank you, Eric and Chuck and MG&E for answering the questions, and all very thoughtful, educated questions tonight. I really appreciate the thought you folks have in coming out and giving an hour of your time here tonight. So thank you, and everyone have a great evening on the longest day of the year.
Could have been collecting solar today in the longest.
Yeah.